Okay, I fixed it. I had to restart my fucking computer. Okay, so the problem is if I how do I make the app not how do I make the app not like work in the background because I'm not gonna have this on forever. Why is my shit so slow? Oh my god, why is this so fuck? Bro, why is it happening?
Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and series of ligaments and bits and interesting shapes that are going on. Sweep in just about the art that we like to do. I'm going to start off with a line bend for the hips. Let's go across here. And with this foot here, I'm just going to come down and imagine just so that everything is relatively safe for work feeling. And we'll take a look at part of torso, anatomy on the inside of the thighs and so on in another tutorial further
How
down the
to
line.
drop boobs.
Not to mention as well, we've already covered a in-depth how to draw legs tutorial where we actually go over the musculature and the structure of what's going on around the legs, especially how to break things down and keep it simple for the knees of your characters. That's available probably with a little. So although we might have this large, generous, so let's start off with a big cylinder that's coming forward here, just a guideline, simple basic shape that's going out over the calf muscles quite nicely before sweeping down, depending on how generous you're making your characters. Interact as they meet back on each other, and then maybe that's going to squeeze down and the top part of the leg, just like so, and then again down onto those. Love the fact that you guys are trying to get into drawing. Now we're doing closed leg squatting positions today. I will do a further video on thighs and so on in another tutorial. It's my hand on and a super cheap disposable mechanical pencil. I'm just using printer paper here with a number of sheets. And the very first thing that I just want to talk through is going to be weight. That is, when you've got a character who's squatting down low, their body weight is essentially going to be sitting down through the headline, and if they're resting down on the back of their heels, that's going to go all the way down to the feet. So I'm just doing a very vague rough line here. I'm going to essentially start working a lot more firmly than I usually do, and I'm going to try to keep things relatively quick, but it does mean they might come out relatively rough as well. And we're going to start off with a character where we're looking just a little bit behind, because I just want to show you how I think about that body weight. Now, this is going to be essentially part one, perhaps, of a two-part tutorial series where we talk about squatting characters. In this example, I'm going to be keeping the knees together, the legs essentially closed in low squats and kneeling positions, just so that everything is relatively safe for work feeling. And we'll take a look at wider splits and what's going on with the anatomy on the inside of the thighs and so on in another tutorial further down the line. Not to mention as well, we've already covered a in-depth how to draw legs tutorial where we actually go over the musculature and the structure of what's going on around the legs, especially how to break things down and keep it simple for the knees of your characters. That's available probably with a little pop-up in the corner of your screen there. So I'm going to assume that you know a little bit of that, just so that we can break down the rest of what's going on into hopefully a relatively easy process. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to think about the curve of the spine and sweep a little bit in just here as I come down from my neckline, and then I'm going to pop out relatively generously.
Wait a minute, I want to do the fucking face.
As we go into the lower part of the torso. And I'm still using some very quick, simple, basic building blocks for this as we look just behind this character's shoulder line. Again, when it comes to the building blocks of torsos and how to break down how to draw bodies in nice, big, simple shapes, we've covered all of this before in a whole load of tutorials. Playlist hopefully available somewhere on the right. And of course, everything that we do here today, I will make a
That's too big.
a copy of everything we draw available over for the patrons on Patreon, where you can get the entire pack of all the references for just $1. So here I've got a very basic back situation. I might imagine that we've got a bit of bum curve going going down around about here into this part of the hip bucket area, and at the middle of the spine, just going to adjust that to go a little bit further up there, and then a shoulder line that's going to be popping one circle off around about there. This shoulder circle is going to be sitting a bit more forward. Somewhere over here. I'm going to be focusing really around the legs, hips, all the way down to the feet, because that's the area that's doing some very interesting things when we draw our characters squatting down, especially if you're trying to maybe depict an anime or manga character who is out on the dance floor, or maybe with a partner doing something more private in a bedroom, and they're really just bringing all of that business all right down and low on the whole situation. So let's just kind of work out what's going there. I'm just going to get some very basic arms out the way as well. I go down to around about the bottom of the chest sphere that we're kind of working on, that elliptical shape, to bring it all together. But I just want to focus on these legs. Now I've got this weight line now that goes down the middle of this character, and I want that weight to sit on the back of the heels. So I'm going to imagine that we've got a very vague circle here for one of the feet. The heel part of that might just be sectioned off loosely here. Again, I'm working a little bit more firmly than I usually do. Usually I'd work very lightly when it comes to these slightly more interesting poses, because we like to explore with some test lines all over the place, and then you can firm up the ones that seem to be working, get rid of the ones that don't seem to be doing a job. I'm also just going to show here the side of the bucket of the hips as we come down there, just slowly building up and adding to the definition of these shapes. There we go. And with this foot here, I'm just going to come down and imagine that it's balancing on the toes on the front. So although we might have this large, generous, vaguely triangular shape that comes down here, it's actually just going to pop at about 90 degrees as we've got the toe section going off there. This isn't a how to draw feet tutorial, which is my excuse for saying this will not be perfect, but hopefully it's going to be just right enough to give you an idea of what's going on. So I've got that weight resting down on that foot, haven't even worried about the legs yet. I'm going to go ahead and just get another one right about here as well, coming down on that edge. Let's just make that the under part of the heel. Now, whether you're drawing shoes or this is going to be bare feet, use these building blocks as a starting point and you can build up from there to see what you like. And now if I imagine that, right, we've got our level character, level shoulders, there's not much contrapposto going on, they've got level hips as well, and the joint's going to come out of this kind of bucket hip area and pop out for the legs. Now, depending on how you kind of measure out the legs for your character and so on, I just like to make sure that the entire leg section is going to be at least about the entire body section. So I might just imagine that halfway we'll take things from about the middle of the hip and we'll work our way down and around. So half of this distance going up here might be how far I'm going to pop out here, but I'm going to foreshorten it a little bit. I'm going to go about this far out, and then I'm going to just take it easy from there, because we're going to block everything back. And I've got a straight line here to indicate the direction of the leg, and I usually drop a circle right on the end for that to be our kneecap. But when legs bend, and again, do check out my how to draw strong legs tutorial, we talk all about this, things start to move around. So my kneecap circle is actually going to be around about here. I've gone lower. And then when I come and follow a line back to this part of the leg, I'm coming off the bottom of that circle line, instead of meeting both of them perfectly in the middle. Now, I'm still thinking about a big, generous, cylindrical shape that's going to be the top part of the legs and the thighs and so on, but I'm going to squeeze it a little bit as well, so that it's starting to flatten out. So let's start off with a big cylinder that's coming forward here, just a guideline, simple basic shape that's going out over the calf muscles quite nicely before sweeping down, depending on how generous you're making your characters. I might just come in a little bit lower, in fact. And again, don't be scared to have loads of test lines until you find out what you do and don't like. Don't be overly beholden to any of your initial guides. They're here to help you, not here to hinder you or lock you into place. I'm going to sweep down towards that knee area and then just generously curve out because it's a cylinder, remember? And then I might just have a line that's just a guide, very lightly coming up there because we're going to change that shape in just a moment. Then in a very similar way, okay, let's come up from here. We've got the hard shin bone. It should take us to the bottom of this circle, round about there. But actually, I'm going to imagine that the calf muscle, which we often draw as a kind of teardrop coming down, well, this is getting really squeezed now. So I'm going to draw this kind of big, squeezing, slightly eggish lump around about here, just like so. And I'm not coming all the way down the leg. I'm just bringing it to around about there. And I'm going to now imagine that, okay, because this part of the muscle is popping up and squeezing here, we're following this line to show how these two sections of the leg interact as they meet back on each other. And then maybe that's going to squeeze down and the top part of the leg that sits on top is going to cover a bit more of this area, especially as the bum sinks down over the back of that foot. So I've got a curve here where I'm actually bumping up into that area to represent that section of the calf. And then I can just firm my way up along this line here. And you'll notice I'm rotating my hand all the way around the place if it helps to give me a gentler, better curving line that I'm enjoying a bit more to get a smooth flow of things. And then as we go up to the knee here, you can kind of imagine, because of the way the muscles are bulging, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, on the side of the knee, I'm actually just imagining a faint squeeze there, and then the kneecap almost separately with its own series of ligaments and bits and interesting shapes that are going on, is then popping out beyond that with a slightly flatter tip, just like so. So I might not draw this line shape here depending on how I'm shading, but I'm going to certainly show that things are projecting out past there, just like that. And in terms of this torso and top area, well, we've covered that a lot before. I will come in on a little bit of time lapse and clean all of that up in just a moment, but let's focus on what's going on down here. This is where the action seems to be. But a lot before. Come in on a little bit of time lapse and clean all of that up in just a moment, but let's focus on what's going on down here. This is where the action seems to be. We've got then the rest of our bum area here. I'm going to sweep round for the other cheek, which is a bit like a golden ratio. We start off shallow and then we get that curve going tighter and tighter before we squeeze into the underside of the bum, just like so. And then again down onto those feet or heels, or depending what's going on with shoes or barefoot. So that's what I'm imagining here. Just imagine that that's squeezing away from us, just like so, and the musculature is squeezing out the side. So I'm just putting this little surface line to show that there's a second bit of extra bump there, and then squeezing out on that calf muscle there before we aim back down towards the shin line. So that's what's going on in terms of how I like to think about the weight. I like to actually go right through the spine line and then sink things right over the feet if this character is putting all of their body weight down on the feet accordingly. And let's take a look at a slightly more sort of front. I want to kind of work out how to evenly keep things going.
feel like the
artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference idea of what's going on here. Basically, you might see some designs, and by the way, this is all fine, but it just doesn't fine. But the problem is if you then try to draw your character without wearing any top clothes on whatsoever, and the boobs are still floating up here, then that just doesn't actually work out, and it starts to look a little bit weird. So I thought what we need to do is just take a look at those slightly more natural circumstances, and that also means that this tutorial today, with any luck that is going to be useful for any forms of illustration, life studies and character design, not just the anime and manga side of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work as quickly as possible, which is always my disclaimer for saying this might be a bit rough around the edges. And we're going to have a look at a couple of different chests and a few different types of boob and so on. I'm just working on super cheap disposable printer paper, if you're following along at home, and a super cheap mechanical pencil as well. You'll notice I've got another scrap of paper down just to rest my hand on because it's very warm today and I don't want to kind of grease or schmutz up my page as I'm kind of cracking along. So I'm just going to give some very vague indications of a chest and arm build up. And like any type of body tutorial, when we focus on any body part, it's always worth mentioning that boobs come in all shapes and sizes. There's no one fast iron rule, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm a very big fan of them, but I'm going to try to cover at least some very common things that are worth thinking about with our chesty character designs. So let's get a tiny bit of chest cavity popping around there. I'm just going to bring that line in a little bit on either side to very quickly build up some body form. And then what I'm also going to do is another very similar chest just over here, but this one I'm going to throw this box of a chest shape into a little bit of angle. So if I imagine that I've got this kind of shallow rectangle from the side now, I can use that as a little bit of a guide to say, okay, let's get that egg shape, which makes up a very simple rib cage area, our kind of firm building blocks. My shoulders are still coming across here. Now our circle for the rough shoulder area is cutting in on that side and being hidden a little bit more on that side, but everything is still vaguely along similar planes, just for the sake of popping this all together. Let's throw that arm back, and as usual, everything that we draw today will be available on Patreon on the work pack, available just for $1 with all these reference images. So thank you very much. Liking, subscribing, following along, of course. But the main point is that boobs are fantastic. However, I want you guys to be able to actually draw them in a realistic manner. And when it comes to the anime stylization of things, sure, you might actually draw them as a bit less realistic, super pert and perky in areas where they might be falling under a bit more gravity normally. But in order to break those rules, firstly, you must learn them. Okay, so two very rough chest areas. Now, when it comes to a not quite so insanely massive natural boob on a character, what I like to do is imagine that I'm starting from inside the neck area here, right just above this top zone, and I'm slowly sweeping out and around into this little quadrant. So what I've done is I've gone below the shoulder circles, and obviously I've got the chest neatly popped in half somewhere about there, and I'm going to sweep to this little quadrant. So what I've done is I've gone below the shoulder circles, and obviously I've got the chest neatly popped in half somewhere about there, and I'm going to sweep this line down, and it's only once I'm past this line that I'm going to break up the profile or the silhouette of the chest and come out around here. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to give this character some kind of boob, but they don't necessarily have to be incredibly full. So we might start with lower cup sizes and work our way around. And if I just very lightly follow this line up, I'm going to create an elliptical shape that exists inside this area here. An egg on its side, leaning in just a little bit, something like that. Now I'm working relatively lightly just because I want to say that with a slightly smaller boob on an anime character, I might just define this as being this line here. So I'm thinking about this entire oval, but I might only draw in my final copy this outside edge around about here. And then what I will do, if I want to make this cup size a little bit bigger, the boob a little bit larger and fuller, I will just simply follow this line further round in my final line art to indicate more mass and more boob tucking back in, like so. So depending on how much you want to go for things, it can be simple as a line around the outside edge. So I'm just going to very quickly repeat that again on this side. Let's start from around about here. Imagine we're traveling out, down, past, out and around, just breaking on the outside edge before I lightly sweep in that shape, just like this. And again, okay, we've got our little tuck of the armpit here. And then I might just have this line cut in a little bit before I sweep around this outside edge, coming down and around. Sorry, this is so rough, but hopefully this is giving you the idea. And coming away like that. And what I just wanted to point out here is that you'll notice that these two things aren't being squeezed together by a Wonder Bra. We don't have any cleavage in the middle, because when your character's just kind of hanging out there with some natural bust, and we can certainly talk about fake boobs in the future and how they maintain a bit more of their shape and firmness. They act a bit more differently. But these two right here are just kind of relaxing, but also going outwards. So if I think about where the kind of nipple might be, we'll mark it off with an X because we can't draw those on YouTube. I might imagine that the surface area of this boob, as we come down here, is going to be curved and sweeping in and under here where everything's bulging. Imagine a water balloon that's sort of sagging at the bottom part. It's bulging down there, but this part of the surface of the boob might still be a relatively straighter surface area. It's sweeping out and then tucking in and under there. And then this particular line, if we're working down the center, sort of towards.
Oh my god. This is like so advanced, so difficult. Why try so difficult? Ugh. Pain. This is so bad. I'm sorry for what I created. I mean, I tried, and yes, it was a short stream, an hour stream. Sad. I'm tired. I'm sick. My eyes hurt. Go to bed.